what if you do these steps this round? What will happen next round? And what if the business is acquired or sold later? Or what if it, times are difficult and you have to do a down round? So what we've done is built into our documents things that people don't even think about. And in fact, I didn't even. So I'm delighted, and we now feel a responsibility to put those protections in, not for the things just that people want, but the things people didn't yet know they want.
Very, very happy to have the chance to talk to you, because I've always enjoyed our conversations, first of all. But secondly, I think you have one of the most unique perspective on this whole situation, not because you're working with other startups, but you're also a tenured founder yourself that has seen crises and lived through them. So I'm really curious about your perspective on this. For those people, you are very well known in the London startup ecosystem, but for those people who have not had the chance to meet you, Anthony Rose is the founder of Seedlegals. He previously led the growth of BBC iPlayer, if I'm not mistaken, and he's a very well-known and respected figure in the London startup ecosystem. So, Anthony, this COVID-19 situation, it's a big crisis. How is this crisis currently changing the London's startups? How are they coping with this, in your observation?
So these are very difficult times for founders, and I think we're seeing it in two ways. Firstly, there's been a huge rush to close rounds before the end of the tax year. So investors are looking for their SEIS and EIS. The vast majority of early stage rounds in the UK are fueled by angel investors with SEIS and EIS. And now the end of tax year approaches, April the 5th, and everyone's looking to close their rounds right now. So in fact, we read about a downturn in fundraising, investors pulling out, but actually in the last few weeks there's been a record number of rounds closed. But what we're seeing is maybe 30% of investors, according to our data, are pulling out of rounds. So people are still closing rounds, but with fewer investors and with a smaller amount. So if your investor is a VC and they are taking 80% of the round and they pull out, or they want a lower valuation, then you've got nowhere to go. The round falls apart. But if you had angel investors and you had a dozen angel investors and a few pull out, they've got their own personal circumstances, whatever, then you still have the option of closing the round with a smaller amount. So reduction in size of rounds, but no reduction in frequency of rounds. And if people are using Seedlegals for their rounds, then they can turn it into a rolling close round to close whatever they can get now and top up later. So one of the important things is that you can top up later. So our advice is, close fast, close now, and then add more when you're able to. And with our rolling close provisions, that becomes super easy. The second thing we're seeing is that companies, of course, now some of them are pretty much unaffected. A med tech company wrote to us saying, we do detection of rare diseases, and guess what? Finding investors is not hard. But other ones, anyone location-based, is going to have a real trouble raising right now. They're also going to have a problem with their actual business. And there they have a big question, should we lay off staff? What should we do? And but there's now an alternative, which is furloughing. So furloughing is where the government picks up 80% of the employee's salary, up to £37,000 a year. So in other words, they have a cap of £2,500 a month that they will contribute. The condition is the person was an employee as of February the 28th. So furloughing, which you have to do for a minimum of 3 weeks, means that the person is can't work for the company, but their wages are largely picked up by the government. So this is a nice, so I guess you could say a win-win, in that if you were to lay off the person, that presents a range of problems. Firstly, for the company, when times pick up again, it's going to be really, really hard to hire people. You'll be competing with everyone else, and you're going to be paying lots of money to recruiters. For the person who's laid off, no one's hiring right now, so it's going to be really, really hard for them to get a job, and you're going to feel bad that they're destitute and you're leaving them in the lurch at a bad time. But with furlough, firstly, they can come back again as soon as you decide, and secondly, since they're still being paid, then that's not such a problem. So you need a furlough notice. You need a contractual variation to their employment agreement. You can't just call them and say, dude, you're furloughed. See you in a few weeks. And you can do that on Seedlegals. And when you do it on Seedlegals, we also give you the option, if you've got very little money, to say just take the government grant, or you can say we'll top you up to your existing salary, so we'll pay the delta, or somewhere in between.
Okay.
So those are the two trends we're seeing, and our furlough notice has proven, I don't want to say the word popular, but enormously popular. And we've had several hundred companies create them over the last few days.
It's been very interesting to observe the growth and decline in usage graphs of different startups. It's quite random in a way. Some companies are really growing fast at this, despite the crisis, and some are having very difficult times. In terms of what Seedlegals is offering legal advice in a very unique way among different things. I would like to hear from you how Seedlegals is adapting, and with that, have you, if you look at the bottom line, seen a growth in demand to your services versus a decline?
So it's a great point. I think two things. Some companies just happen to be in a space where naturally, as circumstances change, it fits them. Obviously, if you're a location-based entertainment or gym or something, that's tough. But the second thing is how companies and founders readapt and take advantage of changing scenarios. And I've always liked that as the attribute of a founder. How are you constantly thinking, what can we do to take advantage of a new situation? And so in our case, it happens that we were perfectly placed. We have a range of things that companies are looking for raising money, documents to grow. Also, everything's online. Our team is perfectly placed to be distributed. We've always chatted with our customer on web chat or Zoom links or Hangouts and so on. So for us, we're now 55 people. Everyone, actually like a duck to water, took to working from home in a day. We've tried super hard to keep up, sort of camaraderie and the team feeling. For me, I've always thought that the hardest thing for working from home wouldn't be so much talking to our customers, but developing new products. And I've always been a big fan of everyone being in the team, in the office together. I'm not a big fan of remote working. I don't know if that will change now, but what I have found is that we can continue to talk to our customers, to talk to each other very efficiently. But when it comes to sitting in a room with a whiteboard making a new product, how will this user journey flow work? And will people click here or that? That's much harder to do remotely. So we've been trying, firstly, we do a weekly Zoom team catch-up. We're now 55 people, so that's quite a big deal. Secondly, we have virtual running with Strava and so on, so they're competitions. We also have a best fridge of the week prize, so people send in a photo of their fridge. I think the first one we have to guess who it is. We try to go, those look like, maybe they're French, maybe it's that guy, I don't know. Then we have a Zoom and lunch on Friday, so week 1, I couldn't get any eggs, but week 2, I had eggs, so I made pancakes live on air. The things one will do. So we're trying really hard to do the team piece, and the feedback from the team is particularly the weekly catch-ups, where you can set Zoom to have a grid view, and everyone can see everyone else, and that I think is really nice. People tell me, the problem, of course, is I think maybe two things for most companies with people working at home. One, feeling like they're part of something. And secondly, maybe, they're bored, there's just no work to do. So cutting to the no work to do, the good news is we're in the opposite zone. This has been a record month for us revenue-wise. It's been a record in terms of site usage. In fact, our site usage has tripled over the last few days. So as people turn to Seedlegals, and I think there I go back to the opportunism, which is, in a sense, my competitors Our law firms, I've no idea how they're used to working from home. Usually things are done and signed on a piece of paper and they make phone calls and so on. Docs are sent by red line word changes. This is all, replaced on Seedlegals. So even if your team don't have a computer, you can e-sign at home. It's all super easy. It's your 24/7 place to go. And then also, we like to see what companies need. And so at the moment, people are raising rapidly, but maybe next month that will drop off. So which things can we do to take advantage of a changing situation? And there, for example, we've become now a help center, because my feeling is we're here in good times and not so good times. We found, and which is quite interesting, is that when you start a business, you just think you're doing some cool stuff. Maybe, you're going to make pilotless aeroplanes, and then it's all fun and games. It's an engineering and maths problem. And then one day you wake up and you discover people are flying on your aeroplanes, and now failure is not an option. And I think with Seedlegals, where we started going, hey, this will be cool. We'll do legal contract automation, cut to something like 15,000 UK startups are now on Seedlegals, and they look to us as the source of knowledge and truth and solutions. And you now know that you can't not respond to somebody overnight, because they're around if it doesn't take place. Maybe the survival of the company. So you suddenly find yourself with a social responsibility and conscience that you need to meet.
The trust you have worked so hard to actually gather is now an accountability, a personal rather than a professional, because it's people's livelihoods. It touches the lives of a lot of people in a lot of ways. So it's a huge responsibility as well, in a way.
Exactly. And I think, one of the dreams you have maybe when you're a founder is that you will have lots and lots of people using your product. But as soon as you do, you now have the additional responsibility of not just meeting a market need, but in a sense, making the market. So the advice you give is used by many people. If we suggest to people you should furlough, I would think that many more companies could or would. So is that a good thing or a bad thing? These are hard questions. So suddenly decisions stop being purely engineering decisions, but start being, more impactful
Philosophical,
decisions.
even to a certain extent.
Exactly. And I think one of the things we've always looked to do in our funding rounds is to build into the documents the things that people don't think about. So my business partner, Laurent Laffy, ex-VC and serial angel investor, is a genius at these things. And most people, when they do a funding round, are just thinking of the next move in a chess game. How do I close this round? I need some money. What do I need to do? What do I sign? The investors are going, what do I need from my SEIs? Do I like these people? Well, is there a viable business? But he thinks about it a few moves out. What if you do these steps this round? What will happen next round? And what if the business is acquired or sold later? Or what if times are difficult and you have to do a down round? So what we've done is built into our documents things that people don't even think about. And in fact, I didn't even think about. And I look back on the last things that I did, I'm going, I didn't do that very well. So I'm delighted, and we now feel a responsibility to put those protections in, not for the things just that people want, but the things people didn't yet know they want.
Looking into the future, how do you think the way startups approach seeking investment and funding and their mentality, coupled with their approach to bootstrapping and early profitability? So how do you think that landscape will evolve once the dust settles down? I know it's quite hectic now, but looking back to 5, maybe 6, maybe a year into the future, what are your thoughts on that?
It's a good question. I think that, a decade ago, we saw the bubble of optimism of investments in companies with a potential future, but no real immediate revenue stream. And then along came blockchain and, we'll do this on blockchain and change the world. But then we saw maybe a rationalization. And maybe that's the difference between US and UK. US is, love what you're doing. It's awesome. It'll change the world. Here's millions. Go for it. Call us when you're ready. Call us when you've changed the world. The UK, investors like to see, in my view, a path to profitability. They'd like to see that the company will, if not after this round, at least after the next round, be revenue generating and very shortly profitable. Otherwise, they see that the company has to keep raising, and it just means dilution. So maybe in the US, the feeling is raising means higher valuation. In the UK, it just means, dude, I'm more diluted. That's not good. But I think what we're now seeing is the next step in that, which is if you don't, so raising is going to be much harder over the next months. I think that it seems to me the UK investment landscape can probably be put into two parts: angel investors and funds. So angel investors are individuals like you and me. They have some spare money, from a few £100s for a crowd round to tens of thousands for an angel round, and they're looking for companies and founders that they believe in. Sometimes they're looking for a tax deduction. Sometimes it's a lifestyle. Sometimes they want to change the world. Sometimes they want a return on investment. But to the extent that they are unsure about the future, or maybe they've got trying circumstances themselves, they may be keeping the money in the bank and not investing. When it comes to funds, they have a fiduciary responsibility to their investors to invest wisely. And there, they may be picking a much narrower field of companies that will firstly be survivors as they see, and taking advantage of different times. They may also be looking for ones with a longer runway. So now comes the key thing, I suppose, which is, to answer your question, if you're a founder, and here's an interesting thing that everyone knows, but to put it in a couple of short sentences is quite interesting, which is, if you have 1 month of runway left and you halve your burn rate, you've bought yourself an extra month. If you have 12 months of runway left and you halve your burn rate, you've bought yourself an extra 12 months. So if raising investment is going to be harder, you should be looking to reduce your burn rate as soon as possible if you don't have at least 12 months worth of runway left. And that means either you've got a big pot of money in the bank, which is great, or you have sufficient revenue so that your burn rate is modest, and without further investment for 12 months, you can still keep going.
It's quite an interesting dynamic, isn't it? Because it makes absolute sense. You halve your burn rate, you double your runway.
That's right.
But at the same time, other businesses are depending on these startups as well. So when they halve their spending, and when a lot of companies do this, the economy or micro pockets within the economy that works with and around startups, such as consultants, individual freelancers, marketing people, recruitment people. So as an industry, everything slows down in a way, which is ideally not the best outcome for anyone out there, but it seems like an inevitable way things are evolving, which makes me feel a lot of startups are going to go bankrupt. Do you think that is the case? I might be too pessimistic.
Obviously I don't know any better than anyone else, but if the companies are going to find it harder to raise, for some of them revenue is unchanged or even growing, but for some of them there's a real problem. Obviously, again, if you're a restaurant, there's no one in your restaurant right now. So I would say the following: one, how rapidly can those companies reinvent themselves into a different space? Number two, how can they cut costs? And that, for example, could be an excellent use of the furlough scheme, where when things come back to normal, they can resume. So it's a bit like going into hibernation rather than going out of business. And three, yes, if you hit the end of the runway, then the company's out of business, whether it's, literally bankrupt, or merely essentially lays off people and cuts its burn rate to zero. But then the question is, does it ever pick up again? These I don't know. Clearly, there's a macroeconomic issue, but for a founder, you've got to solve your own problems before other people's problems.
So for startups out there, founders that are struggling with the current situation, do you have any tips or things that you've seen work very well in some of the startups? And I think this conversation would go best with the fact that, in my view at least, this is not a traditional crisis or a general slowdown of the whole economy, because some businesses, some niches are picking up, whereas some of them are going down. And I think the ratio is like 30 to 70%. 70% of types human behavior has changed at a mass scale. So I think that's something to keep in mind, that this is not a typical recession in that sense. But maybe in combination with that, what are your thoughts? If I may, I'm a founder, if I'm a struggling entrepreneur and I'm having a quite difficult time now, what would your words of advice would be?
Well, I mean, I'd like to say, and maybe what I think is, you find yourself plonked in the desert, and now you've got to get out of the desert. So you have to make decisions, and you have to have a plan. The plan can change, but I think one of the key attributes of founders is you have to make decisions. Failure to make decisions means you go nowhere or die. And so what are the tough decisions that you need to make, and how soon do you need to make them? So I think separately, how can you be innovative? So maybe you find yourself, in the desert, and maybe the desert's bad because it's just, sand, but you find yourself on the island. And now, how are you going to make a hut? What are you going to do? How are you going to get off the island? And I think when you're an employee in a company, you can always look to others for help and guidance and the answers. But when you're a founder, there's often no one to turn to. I mean, you can scour the internet, you can ask your colleagues, but often you've got to make the hard decisions either yourself or with your co-founders. Mm-hmm. And there, I think, maybe it's, me having lived in Australia, where there's a general mentality that comes from the first settlers, which is, if you don't find food, you're going to die, because it's 3 months for the next ship to arrive from England. You better work it out. And so Australians have this, there's a problem. No one's going to sort it. We have to sort it. But I think elsewhere,
that's a very good attitude, actually.
That's right. But I think in the old world, there is, much more of an attitude of the government or society or someone will sort it for us. But I think, that there's only a limited amount. I mean, if the government's lavishing 300 billion on things, there's a limited amount that's going to happen. Plus, you're just going to get the base rate, right? You're going to get the drip feed to keep you alive. You want to do better than that. So I think my advice, and again, in this area, it's no better than anyone else's, right? One, procrastination is not an option. Sitting around and thinking, I'll just wait for things to play out, leaves you at the mercy of everything and no better than anyone else. Thing two is, how can I take advantage of the situation? In some cases, it's limited. But I think a great example is at Seedlegals, we subscribe to delivery of food to the company. So on Monday mornings, we have a wonderful box of fresh fruit that arrives for the team. And on Fridays, we have a team lunch delivered, and we all go to the park in summer or sit around and do a team catch up in winter. So in summer in the park. So these companies deliver food to the office, but since nobody's in the office, what's going to happen? So I felt really, really sad when I had to email the companies and cancel or suspend our office food delivery. I thought, how will they survive? And then I thought, well, one of them closed around on Seedlegals. I love to be nice to our customers. I'm going to subscribe personally for home delivery. And I went to their site, and they'd, essentially pivoted to home delivery. And they were so busy that, they said, sorry, not taking orders right now. And then I looked at their site traffic. I always like similarweb.com. So whenever I look at a company and they tell me they've got X number of users or whatever, I always like to look at their site traffic and see if that's a BS number or not. And I looked at their site traffic. It looked like Zoom. It's just went up. So clearly where I see founders reinvent what they do to take advantage of the times, I think that's super important. And sometimes it's done purely opportunistically, and sometimes there's a social conscience around it. On Seedlegals offering furlough leave, furlough notices, it's completely free on the platform, but that's led to a huge amount more site traffic. So on the one hand, we've put capex and we've put work to provide something for people at no cost. Obviously, our hope is those companies will find Seedlegals, and when business picks up again, they'll want something from us and they'll see it's a great solution compared to others. So how might you as a founder look to see how people change their behaviors and what can we offer in this new way?
Those are fantastic words of advice, and I think it's a very mature perspective. If I may, I'd like to wrap up by just underlining a point you made. This the government support is very generous in a lot of ways. It's unprecedented, but it is not it is not wise to assume it is here to stay, but rather see it as a petrol, as a boost to give startups the space to maneuver where the new customer needs and demands are, and give them enough space, enough runway so they can reposition themselves in a way that's going to fit the new reality, rather than expect things are going to go back to normal and this is just a time to sit and wait. Thank you very much for being. Is there anything you would like to add before we finalize?
Yeah, I think, when people are looking to government handouts, the problem is many sectors are lobbying very hard for government handouts. And, the question is where startups sit on all of that, because if the government helps a company with 10,000 employees, that's 10,000, jobs that are saved or at least prolonged and so on. Helping startups is much harder. Are they on PAYE? Are they making revenue? If there's something with a bank loan, would the bank lend you money anyway if the company is quite informal? If it's pre-revenue, the bank would have a hard time lending. So people should be very careful about assuming that some of these initiatives will be applicable to them. I think one of the things that startups are seeing very rapidly is the promise of bank loans and so on. It turns out that although the government may underwrite some of those loans, the same bank lending criteria apply. So when you phone your friendly bank and say, can I apply for the loan? And they go, are you profitable? And you go, no. And they say, do you have revenue? And you go, not really. Then it's a very short call. So assume that you have to make do yourself and then see which things you might take advantage of. And even things like furlough leave, where there are, if there was anyone employed on PAYE on Feb 28, you can put them on furlough, which is, a really low bar to dramatically cutting your costs. But it's the end of April till the government has its furlough site or set up themselves. And so you're still going to have to cover this month's payroll and you can reclaim it later. So there's no, silver lining. You're going to have to figure it out. And also you're going to have to try and, raise funding as much as you can to stay in business so that when things do pick up, you're in a great place to take advantage of that.
That's very well put. Thank you very much for being a part of this, Anthony. I think we have to stick together as a community, help each other, and help other people help each other in a way, because startups learn from one another. And at times like this, I think nothing is more valuable than seeing another startup that has struggled with a problem, did find a solution to that, and then replicate that and remodel that. And that is why actually I'm doing this, and let's hope this reaches to as many people as it can. And thank you very much again for being a part of this.
And thank you for the opportunity.